Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Balaba Girivardhari Gopabha Girivardhari Girivardhari Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jamuna Thiravanachari Jamuna Thiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivardhari Girivardhari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivardhari Girivardhari Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jamunatiravanachari Jamunatiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Hari Acharya Astatara Satasni Srimad His Divine Grace Desi Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagvatam Ki Samveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Text 11 from Canto 6, Chapter 4, the Hansaguya prayers. Atishtata satam margam kopam yachata deepitam pitra pita mahinapi jushtamba prapita mahai Atishtata sata margam kopi kopam yachata deepitam pitra pitta mahinapi jushtamba prapita mahai Atishtata satam margam kopam yachata deepitam pitra pita mahinapi justamba prapita mahai Atishtata satam margam Gopam yachata deepitam Pitra pita mahinapi Jushtam apratita mahai Atishtata satam margam Gopam yachata deepitam Pitra pita mahinapi Jushtamba prapita mahai Tishtatam aham margam Yachata deepitam Pitra pita mahinapi Jushtamba prapitam Atishtata satam margam Gopam yachata deepitam Pitra pita mahinapi Jushtamba prapita mahai Atishtata. Just follow. Satam margam. The path of the great saintly personalities. Kopam. Subdue. Deepitam. Which is now awakened. Pitra. By the father. Pitamahena api. And by the grandfather. Jushtam. Executed. Vaha. Your. Pratitamahai. By the great grandfathers. Translation: the path of goodness traversed by your father, grandfather, and great-grandfathers is that of maintaining the subjects, prajas, including the men, animals, and trees. That is the path you should follow. Unnecessary anger is contrary to your duty, therefore I request you to control your anger. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Hear the words, Pitra, Pita Mahenapi Drishtamva Pratita Mahai, depict an honest royal family consisting of the kings, their father, their grandfather, and their great-grandfathers. Such a royal family has a prestigious position because it maintains the citizens, or prajas. The word praja refers to one who has taken birth within the jurisdiction of the government. The exalted royal families were conscious that all living beings, whether human, animal, or lower than animal, should be given protection. The modern democratic system cannot be exalted in this way because the leaders elected strive only for power and have no sense of responsibility. In a monarchy, a king with a prestigious position follows the great deeds of his forefathers. Thus, Soma, the king of the moon, here reminds the Prajetas about the glories of their father, grandfather, and great-grandfathers. So, verse again, Atishtata satam margam gopam yachata deepitam pitamahenapi drishtamva prapita mahai. The path of goodness by your father, grandfather, and great-grandfathers is that of maintaining the subjects, prajas, including the men, animals, and trees. That is the path you should follow. Unnecessary anger is contrary to your duty. Therefore, I request that you control your anger. So a little appreciation first, the context. The first three verses of the first three chapters, of this canto are the theology of the holy name. It's because previously the end of the fifth canto, the end of the fifth canto, cosmology was discussed, the hellish planets were discussed, Maharaj Parikshit asking what can be done to prevent persons from having to experience the reaction of their terrible sins and experiencing hell. So the antidote, the cleansing of the reactions of one's previous sins, is pointed to the process of devotional service beginning with chanting, which is our message, because it's the Bhagavatam's message and it's Lord Chaitanya's message, and the theology of the holy name is described thoroughly. And then this chapter follows, where the question is now raised, well, you were previously in the third canto and following sections describing the process of creation and the population of, within creation, of praja, or offspring by the Prajapatis, the great personalities whose service it was to the Creator, Lord Brahma, to create praja. And so, could you further expand that explanation? Elaborate, please. So that's the question. And so the response that's given is what we have here. There was in previous description, there were the prachetas, and from the end of the fourth canto, Srimad Bhagvatam. The Prachetas were the sons of King Prachinipari, and they were then entrusted with the service by King Prachinipari to further create good praja, and they did so, but first they qualified themselves. They entered into the sea for 10,000 years, meditating, no cheating underwater, controlling the breathing process. And before entering into the sea, they were met by Lord Shiva and his associates, and Lord Shiva spoke with them, saying, I'm very pleased by your mood of submission to your father. And because of that quality that you have, I've decided to come before you and show myself, and I'm very rare to be seen. But because of that quality of you, I am showing myself to you, and I'd like to give you something. The gift I'd like to give you is the process of achieving not just the qualification to produce good praja, but direct encounter with the personality of Godhead face to face. I'd like to give you that gift. And the gift comes in the form of some prayers that I myself recite, so he gave them some prayers. And they were most grateful. Similarly, just transferring this wonderful quality of submission unto their father, and his just merely indicated to them what he wanted, and fully prepared to whatever 10,000 years underwater, sure, no problem. And then underwater, Lord Vishnu came. Pretty amazing. Riding on the back of Garuda, underwater. Of course, he can do what he wants. Garuda can do what he wants, whatever Lord Vishnu wants to. So there was this exchange. So they're Krishna conscious, or Shuddha Bhaktas. And Shuddha Bhaktas don't become angry, but they became angry somehow. They came out of the water, and for this 10,000 years, not only they weren't there, but their father, King Prachinipari, had become purified by Narada's association, that wonderful lengthy description, where in a different way than the Prachetas received perfection, he received at least the message of perfection through Narada, this elaborate parable or story. And then the king understood the futility of fruitive activities, which is really necessary before you can give up fruitive activities, to enter then into a similar process of achieving perfection. So there was no king for a long period of time, 10,000 years. Of course, it's Satya Yuga, but still 10,000 years is 10,000 years, and thus neglected, the earth had become overgrown, like wild, with trees and plants and creepers and all types of vegetation, but not necessarily grains for human consumption. Agriculture and that kind of thing requires cleared land and using the land in a different way. So out of concern for the human beings, the Prachetas went, and they chose as a means of clearing the land, from their mouths came wind and fire, like human torches. Just everything in sight. All of them at once. Just mass devastation of the forests. And the Lord of vegetation, trees and plants, became very concerned. And this is a little detail. We discussed this yesterday morning in Naperville. There's discuss the appearance of Dattatreya from Canto 1, Chapter 3. And Dattatreya is a partial expansion of Lord Vishnu as the son of Atri and Anasuya. But he had two brothers. Atri and Anasuya wanted the Supreme Lord and Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, like them, a son. There's different renderings. We want one son that's a combination of everything. Anyway, Soma, this is a detail, but Soma is a partial. So the three lords appeared: Lord Vishnu, Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, and in a trio, three voices at once said, "So it shall be. All three of us will appear as your sons very soon." So Soma is the partial manifestation of Lord Brahma, partial incarnation. Durvasa Muni, partial incarnation of Lord Shiva, and Dattatreya, partial incarnation of Lord Vishnu. So this is Soma. I just find it interesting, especially interesting, that the partial incarnation of Lord Brahma, Soma, is in charge of vegetation, trees and plants and everything that's the non-moving living entities. If you were going to be Lord Brahma, and you had to see to the population of existence, that place that you created, it would be very important to have something which sustains the life of all the other life forms, or most of the other life forms, many of the other life forms, the insects, the birds, and the beasts, and the humans. So Soma became in charge of that. Prabhupada has described things grow not just by sunlight photosynthesis, they require also moonlight. Otherwise, they don't grow properly. So, in fact, moonlight is essential. So moonlight is essential for growth of vegetation, and Soma is in charge of vegetation. So when the vegetation was being devastated, he stepped in. And one of the things I like about this section is they were so qualified, the Prachetas were so qualified that it just took words, Soma, and it was all over. There was no negotiation, no back and forth. It was just, yes, sir. Because they had that same quality of their regard for their father, and naturally the regard for Soma. All it took was just some indication from Soma. Like, please, stop. A similar dynamic is there in when the Rudras, born from the brow of Lord Shiva, the brow of Lord Brahma came Rudra, and Rudra expanded, from the brow of Lord Shiva, the brow of Lord Brahma came Shiva, out of his anger that the Kumaras had declined to assist in creating Praja. Lord Shiva expanded into 11 Rudras, and 11 Rudras started devastating everything, and even some started attacking Lord Brahma. And all it took was Lord Brahma to say, stop. This isn't the right time to devastate things. It's not even set up yet, so please, just go meditate for some time, till the end of devastation, whatever that number is, 4,800,000,000 years, or whatever the number is. A little while, just go meditate for some time. And that's all it took, and they stopped. And there's other episodes like that. Like Dhruva, when he was angered at the death of his brother or stepbrother, Anupam. So to take revenge, he went to the kingdom of the Yakshas, their capital city. Several things happened, but he was just destroying them left and right. And all it took was some indication. Stop. He stopped. Anger is difficult to control when one gets angry. Persons that are gripped by anger, because that's in the verse. Deepitam, kopam, yachata, deepitam. Kopam is anger, and deepitam, which has now awakened. Deepa is fire, flame, or light. When anger arises, whoa, it's hard to control anger. Although qualified, somehow, they became controlled by anger. But all it took was the words of Soma, and it was gone. It's very important. It indicates their qualification. And the opposite indicates disqualification, just the words of Soma. And another element in the text is the way the Prabhupada is translated in the verse. Unnecessary anger is contrary to your duty. So that may seem to indicate that some anger is necessary. Like, for example, Prabhupada spoke about Krishna's talks with Arjuna. Of course, when we read Bhagavad Gita, it's not like the end result is we're supposed to get angry. But for Arjuna to fight, Prabhupada explains, in order to fight, and to fight means to death, it's either you die or the other person dies, that kind of fight. Not like wrestling and they tumble around and something happens and then they get up and they wrestle again. It's not like that. This is till death. So Prabhupada explains, for Arjuna to fight, he had to become angry. This is a different kind of anger than, our anger, and an appropriate kind of anger. And when that anger is no longer required, the anger is put away. So, like, for example, at the end of the day of fighting, they would associate with one another the two parties. Controlled anger. This is religious fighting. I'll just share a little episode, an anecdote, a story, a pastime with Prabhupada, where I've seen it a number of times, but there's one time that was like really amazing, where Prabhupada showed anger and then just put it away. He used it for a purpose. Anger, he was using it for a purpose. He became angry, and his anger subsided immediately. So here's the situation. There's some cases where his anger continued too, but it was appropriate that his anger continue for different reasons. 1974, 73, 73. What is now the BBT previously wasn't the BBT, it was ISKCON Press. Prabhupada later made it a separate entity, a trust, so that if something happened to ISKCON, nothing would happen to the book trust, his intellectual property. So it was a separate set up entity. But there was a time when it wasn't, it was ISKCON Press. And ISKCON Press started in Boston because Satsrup Maharaj was there and he was very good at editing and intellectual pursuits. So Jayadvaita Swami also went there as an editor, and the whole team was set up. The artists, the transcribers, the editors. ISKCON Press was in Boston. And then circumstances, ISKCON Press moved to New York. And when ISKCON Press was in New York, there were too many of them. They needed a workspace, so from where the temple was, a couple blocks away, kind of like a warehouse type of neighborhood, they rented a warehouse. And they did their work. They lived at the temple, they went and did their work, the ISKCON Press work at the warehouse. And the artists, there was a whole crew of like 10 at least, maybe more artists, and they had their space, the loft space where they did their artwork. And then when Prabhupada would come, it was a ritual. They would bring, at their designated time, they would bring their artwork to look at. You know, they had their whole year, they're dedicating their life and soul and blood, sweat, and tears and whatever it is, their whole devotion to please Prabhupada. And so he reciprocated by having them bring their artwork. So they marched over from Tiffany Place to Henry Street and into Prabhupada's quarters, and they needed people to carry the paintings, so I volunteered to carry paintings. So we went into Prabhupada's room, and one by one, the artist would stand behind and hold up his painting and show to Prabhupada, and he would comment about what he saw. Sometimes it was funny, sometimes it was instructive, sometimes he said, like one particular example I remember was, there was Yudhishthira Maharaj entering after Krishna's departure. He left for the Himalayas, so it shows him carrying a danda, wearing saffron. It explained that Kshatriyas don't take the sannyas order. When they renounce, they don't take sannyas and carry a danda. They just renounce. When the kings give up their worldly duty, there's no formal sannyas. The brahmanas would take formal sannyas. He said, but that's okay, you can leave it. And different things. So I was seated, Prabhupada, like this was where Prabhupada was, and his table was out here. I was seated like right there. I noticed he pressed a little buzzer button underneath his desk. So that meant over there was his servant. That was a signal for his servant to come in. So right in the middle of this really warm, fluid, laughter, happiness, loving exchange with these very dedicated and talented, super talented artists, in came his servant. Well, the servant was still paying obeisances. Prabhupada's voice raised so many decibels, I don't know, probably broke the meter, and said something that I can't remember because my brain just shut down when he said whatever he said. And the devotee trembled and then paid obeisances and left. And it's just a little appreciation of our founder Acharya. When he was in a mood, his mood was so powerful that it just carried everybody. And when he would laugh, everyone laughed. Sometimes he would tell Bengali jokes. Nobody understood the joke. But Prabhupada laughed, and his whole body laughed, and laughed, and laughed, and the whole room just filled with laughter. And then when he would become very angry, he's very powerful. Guru, heavy. Those that had more association than I had told me other stories, but this, you get the picture. So Prabhupada is laughter and happy and light and warm, and then thunder and lightning and tornado and tsunami, and then as soon as the person had gone, it was back to laughter and happy, and same as it was, like, whiplash. And I could understand that Prabhupada was using anger for a particular purpose, for that person who it was good for in that circumstance. I didn't know what the circumstance was. I found out later, without the detail. It was appropriate for that person in that circumstance. But it wasn't for all of us. It was to help that person in his Krishna consciousness at that particular junction and what he was going through. So he was using anger but wasn't controlled by anger. That's the main message here. So there is an appropriate, back to the verse, there is appropriate utilization of anger. And then there's unnecessary anger. It takes a qualified person to know what's appropriate, what's necessary, what's beyond what's appropriate, what's beyond what's necessary. For us, we're best just controlling anger, rather than like sorting out when is it appropriate. But there is certainly, it's our Vaishnava teaching. Narottama Das Thakur describes like this. There's purpose in everything in God's creation. One needs to know its utilization. So the Soma is indicating to the Prajetas, you're over the top. So your concern is there's no land cleared for agriculture for the human species. Okay, clear some land for agriculture for human species, no problem. But you're devastating everything. And that's unnecessary, which is contrary to your duty. And this is text 11. Just going to read text 14. He says it again. One who inquires into self-realization and thus subdues his powerful anger. So that's a prerequisite for controlling and subduing powerful anger. That means even with there's words given, if one is not doing, self-realization requires inquisitiveness. I want to know. Which means there's humility, I don't know. But I want to know. There's an inquisitive spirit. Pursuing self-realization properly, in the proper mood, helps subdue any qualified person to saying, please stop. That should be sufficient. Then anger can be subdued. One who inquires into self-realization and thus subdues his powerful anger, which awakens suddenly in the body as if falling from the sky, transcends the influence of the modes of material nature. Transcending the influence of the modes of material nature. So that's the wish of Soma, is their advancing in the path of self-realization. They're carrying out their duty properly. In addition to protecting, right? I want to protect mine. So stop. You're not protecting. So he has the big picture. He's qualified. And the Prajetas are also qualified. They just kind of, went off the center of the road, and now they're, getting a tap on the shoulder, get back to the center of the road. That's all it took. And one other very important point, in which Prabhupada, I saved this for last on purpose, Prabhupada refers to it 3 times in this brief purport. Starting with the very first line of the purport, and then says it again, and then says it again. And that is not only doing the right thing, because there's the right thing. He could have just said, here's the right thing. So please do the right thing. He invoked the quality of character that an elevated soul will have. That quality of character is following with great respect the father and the grandfather and the great-grandfather, the forefathers. Krishna does the same thing with Arjuna, isn't it, in Bhagavad Gita? This is unbecoming. Not only you're an Aryan, but it's not fitting the followers of Kuru. Please get control of yourself. It's a powerful influence for a person of character. For a person that doesn't have character, who cares? Something that Prabhupada spoke about, that in the West, family is broken. And so it was easy for the young Western people to step outside of what their family did and do something new and different. And in other places where culture is very strong, it's difficult to break family tradition. Very difficult. In places that have that part of their culture. Oriental, Japanese, certainly in India, for some who have that in their upbringing and the culture in which they're grown. So we're products of our culture to some degree. And in the West, culture of no culture. It's there to some degree, but not like it is where it's very strong in culture. But where there's a cultured person, it's very strong. And it's not just because your grandfather did it, your grandmother did it. There's fidelity for the right reason. In the right way. That's three layers of challenge. And the emphasis that is being drawn, I'll read it again, these three sections from the purport. Hear the words. This is the first line of the purport. Pitra pita mahena pi jushtam va prapitat mahai depict an honest royal family consisting of the kings, their father and grandfather, and their great-grandfathers. Then again, the modern democratic system cannot be exalted in this way because the leaders elected strive only for power and have no sense of responsibility. Responsibility unto the qualified forefathers. Not just, the dynasty model, but qualified people that set example, and so we follow the example of those who set the example. We don't just carve new territory. The new territory model is the democracy model. We're going to do things this way, that way, because it makes sense to us to do things this way, that way, without due reference. Then again, in a monarchy, a king with a prestigious position follows the great deeds of his forefathers. So one needs to understand the principles of action. I'm a little excited about this particular point, so please forgive me if I get a little excited. The excitement has to do with, say, succession, or preserving ISKCON going into the future. I'll just go over here and come back again. Just put that on pause for a moment. The background that can so I can share with you the level of concern is Prabhupada disciples who had his direct association, and in his direct association, and with those that had his direct association, like I shared with last night with Bibi Govinda Maharaj, that in the part of the attractiveness of the Boston Temple was there were devotees that had Prabhupada's association, a lot. And prasadam wasn't like prasadam. It was hearing, it was just, everyone came together and we heard Prabhupada's stories. Morning, midday, and evening. Morning, midday, and evening. Morning, just like, so the mood of Prabhupada, of course, media now you have access to that. But there was something special about those that had that association with Prabhupada. Like, I really wish that Shyamasundar had come, because he had that association. And when he narrates his exchange with the Prabhupada, you can feel it, isn't it? Those that have heard him speak. Anyway, those of us that are Prabhupada disciples, just because we're Prabhupada disciples, we're a little bit older, and we're like looking around, wondering, what's it going to be like when we're gone? And, the mood that Prabhupada had, and with which he started this awesome, never before done in the history of the world, in 11 years, a religion goes all over the world. And how to maintain that? There has to be fidelity to our founder Acharya, whether he's your father or grandfather or great-grandfather. That fidelity needs to be there. And how are we going to pass that on? Those who are Prabhupada disciples. So there's strategic planning, there's a succession group, and there's the preeminent position of Srila Prabhupada group or committee. And one of the main things that committee has produced is one person, Rabindra Suprabhu, who's perhaps the best writer in ISKCON presently, wrote this wonderful booklet, not just a paper. So there's a very deep, referenced from authority paper on the meaning of founder Acharya, because Prabhupada insisted. He was, say it loud, he insisted that wherever his name was, it was founder Acharya, and his name was on all the books. I'll just tell a little anecdote. You look at the bottom, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, small letters, founder Acharya. So this was in Boston, and they had a printing press, so they're printing chapters of Canto 2 as they were prepared and printed chapter by chapter. And they left out founder Acharya. Save space on the cover page, who knows? Prabhupada was livid. There's a conspiracy. I don't know. Some persons who are historians in ISKCON may know. I don't know. There was something going on, not just in the books, but a conspiracy. He insisted on all of our letterhead, on our stationery, on our buildings, right, Chaitanya? Like founder Acharya. And Prabhupada commented, in the future there may be other acharyas, but there's one founder Acharya within ISKCON. So, Rabindra's nice paper to explain it. For your information, this is an ISKCON news item. Going into the future, all candidates for first initiation and those that have first initiation who are to receive second initiation must pass a disciple course. And part of the message of the disciple course is to ensure that the understanding of Prabhupada as the founder Acharya is carried out, is like imparted, for the preservation of ISKCON going into the future. What is? If somebody doesn't like that, that's their choice, and then there's a place for them. It's not within ISKCON. It's not like rude. It's just maintaining ISKCON because Prabhupada created it, and it's we understand his mood and the principles and the applications of those principles, and they need to be followed. Like the Prachetas, or like Dhruva, or like anyone. The Prachetas' quality that was appreciated by Lord Shiva was their fidelity to their father. He just said, go create praja, and that was it. Yes, sir, was the answer. And off they went to qualify themselves first. So that submission to the father and the grandfather and the great-grandfather, so that we can understand the principles and how those principles are to be applied, must, for ISKCON to remain intact, which Prabhupada wanted ISKCON to do, to remain intact. And there's a good reason for it. Prabhupada was uniquely empowered. He did something. That was the indication of Bhaktisiddhanta, that to preserve this global ISKCON, it was the International Society of Vaishnavas, must have its integrity and fidelity with our founder Acharya. There's principles, and there's the applications of those principles that he uniquely did. Bhaktisiddhanta indicated it, it wasn't followed, fell apart. Too bad. Wasn't a loss, but it could have continued, but it didn't, because they didn't do what he said. In principle, they did something else. And that one simple thing that Prabhupada referred to repeatedly was forming the GBC. So now, what's the role of the GBC? It's to carry forward, in part, it's to carry forward the maintaining of the integrity of the International Society of Devotees. I'll just give you a little detail. This is an ISKCON news matter. You may know that the GBC held an ILS, International Leadership Sangha. You familiar with that? Some of you? 1,000 leaders from all over the world came to Mayapur. We read about the International Society, but this was it was really colorful. It was an international assembly of leaders. And this leader doesn't know that leader, doesn't know that leader, doesn't know that leader. Like I sat down, we were requested, GBC members, don't just sit with your friends, go meet these other leaders, because they'd like to meet the GBC. So I was doing that. Sometimes I had to do some other things. But so one time I sat with a group of devotees from Africa, and I sat down, and they smiled and said, where are you guys from? And they said this place, that place. I said, do you know each other? And they said, well, we know each other because we have festivals. We have regional festivals, we come together. And we have our regional festivals, then we've gotten to know each other over the years. And we go back and do our service. Now catch the model. We're having this International Leadership Sangha, where persons that they're not from the same region, they don't know each other, coming together, and then coming together, so that it's to help preserve the integrity of our international society, because otherwise it can start going in different directions. So at the end of the ILS, different persons were asked to be, say a 5 minute, 6 minute something. So I was asked to be one of those persons. And I shared the following. Going back to when we started our strategic planning, this is application of the philosophy in real time. So, 2007, Bhakti Vaibhav Maharaj was our GBC chairman. And some of our GBC members had left their bodies. Very senior persons, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Sridhar Maharaj, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, I think there was one other. And he said, whoa, the GBC chairman, who knows who's next? And is there something that we should be doing while Prabhupada's disciples are still with us to ensure that ISKCON remains strong and we hand on to the next generation something that's strong and will endure for Prabhupada. So he called an emergency meeting or special meeting to discuss that. We met in Italy, summer 2007, and from that, skipping some detail, some different groups came, like, creating a constitution. Prabhupada wanted it, and 18 years ago, we still didn't have one. So, constitution committee, succession of leaders committee, outreach committee, unique position of Prabhupada as our founder Acharya committee, and different other committees. Lines of authority committee, because when Prabhupada was present, there was the governance line and the spiritual line was one. He was the head of both. And after, then there's gurus over here and governance people over here. And how do the two work? Because there's real authority and there's real authority. How do they spend some time, 5 years, on that topic? So now, on the succession committee, I started with the outreach because that's what I like, but I got moved over to this other one, succession committee. And Bhakti Vaibhav Maharaj, Bhakti Vigyan Maharaj, I don't know if any of you know him personally. He's brilliant. He's a PhD, and he's got this massive following of Russian devotees and a horrible government situation to deal with. He's sitting on pins and needles all the time. A brilliant person leading the whole Russian yatra. So he became part of the succession committee, and he stated why he wanted. So I shared this at the ILS. Bhakti Vigyan Maharaj said, supposing, just like here in Russia, what to speak of the rest of the world, over there in, eastern part of Russia, in the Siberia and that part of Russia, they do things a little different. Then over there in St. Petersburg, they do things a little different. Over here in Moscow, we do things a little different. And I'm the GBC. And I want to see harmony. I don't mind individuality, that's good. But there's certain things that need to be. So now, go over time, and this one's starting to grow that way, and that one's starting to grow that way, and that one's starting to grow that way. What's it going to be like? And I'm thinking like this in Russia, and then what to speak of the world. So, wouldn't it help the preservation of the unity of ISKCON going into the future if leaders could get common training and kind of cross-pollinate? He felt very strongly there should be a place, like a seminary, where those who are going to be leaders can get trained on the same principles and the applications of those principles and understand and appreciate one another's mood, although it may be, unity in diversity, respect the diversity, but also see what the unity elements are. And so they get to know one another and doesn't become this splinter, or what happened to the Gaudiya Math, the losing of the symmetry. So that was 2009 or 10, probably 2009. Krishna made some arrangement. Radhanath Maharaj has an acquaintance, a man who, within his heart, his super soul gave this idea. I have a property, and I'd like it to be gifted to ISKCON. It can be used for training leaders. It's in Thane. I don't know exactly where that is. Those of you from Bombay will know. And so we're now planning a curriculum that we put a hold moratorium on new GBC members until we get this college together. Gauranga Prabhu from Chaupati is developing the curriculum along with his team. He's like a fantastic personality, so productive. And the GBC is going to be looking at the curriculum and the system for selection, and so that we have some going into the future, some unity. along with the diversity of people and places and their needs and styles and emphasis and things, to preserve. These are three, I've mentioned so far, three different things where preserving the unity of ISKCON is work that the GBC, it's taking time. Everything, good things may take some time to develop, and then over a period of time, for new devotees, for future leaders, for this paper, and other things, so that the position of our founder Acharya is intact, going over the next generation and generations. He's our founder Acharya. And his indications are what we follow. That's ISKCON. And that's principles and applications of those principles. Just like Bibi Govinda Maharaj was sharing last night, this mood that Prabhupada exhibited in his mood of expansion and fearlessness at the same time of humility and complete dedication at the risk of life for the instructions, fulfilling the instructions of his spiritual master as his life and soul. We're not all at that platform, but that's what lifts us. To whatever degree we conceive that, we can receive that, it lifts us. And for those who are spiritually progressive, or referring now to text 14, those who are involved in the process of self-realization, that is, inquisitive into the absolute. Who am I, and who is the Supreme, and what is my relation? Those who are inquisitive, all it takes is some indication from the Father, or the grandfather, or the great-grandfather. And what Prabhupada did, once again, I'll end, what Prabhupada did was unique. He had the qualification. And that's his position as not only Acharya, but specifically founder Acharya. And ISKCON must, like big letters, must be in fidelity with our founder Acharya, who did some things without, he crossed the ocean. Bhaktisiddhanta attempted the same, but he crossed the ocean and he established temples in the West where things were different than in India. So he allowed women to receive Brahminical initiation and worship deity on the altar, and that never happens in India. But it happens in the West. Etc. Without all he made the adjustments, and he had the capacity to do that, gifted by Krishna. And our business is not to second guess. You're not the founder Acharya. If we want to second guess, we can do so outside of ISKCON. It's not like, kick people out kind of mood. It's maintain the integrity. We must respect the founder Acharya. That's ISKCON. How he did what he did. The principles and the applications of those principles. And those that are representing him, that is, brahmanas and administrators and whatever else representing him, must keep their indications in fidelity with his, and must know the difference between what's a detail and what's a principle. We must. Otherwise, that which is ISKCON will be lost. Those who are with fidelity to Prabhupada can't allow that. He's not like mean or conservative or not broad thinking, but we must be in fidelity with our founder Acharya. Those that have that, those who are loyal, like, the Prachetas, your forefathers, your father and your forefathers. Please remember them and the principles that they conducted their activities by, and just do that. In this case, it's you want to clear some land. Fine, you've cleared some land. Now stop. That's sufficient. Because the reason is we're going to hear that the trees supply food for other forms of life too, that are part of God's creation. So now one can get they should be protected, and we can get groups of people in this world. I'll just end with this: groups of people in this world that promote causes without reference to God, without reference to predecessors, just in principle. Like one of the places that I visit is Oswego, Oregon. It's where Mother Jamuna was born, and it's where the president of the Portland Temple lives, in the same town. There's Lake Oswego, and it's a nice place. And they have a rule: if you want to build, you can't cut down trees. You have to build your house around the trees, not the trees around your house. It's like a rule. That's cool. Lots of trees. On what basis? Well, it's just like they like that rule, which is nice. It's a nice rule. But it doesn't have it doesn't help one become God conscious. It helps one have, respect for nature and for trees. It's good. But it's not transcendental. And we are being trained towards the transcendental, not just causes, but on the authority. So on the authority of predecessor. And for us, Srila Prabhupada is the blender of all, whatever the previous acharyas he's given us. ISKCON means we're in fidelity with him. Period. He's our ultimate Shiksha Guru. And so this founder acharya title means anyone in subsequent generations must be in full fidelity with the acharya, must be in full fidelity with the founder acharya. It's kind of like what Ramanujacharya's position is in the Sri Sampradaya. There may be many acharyas, but he's the founder. And anyone, their teachings and their mode of everything must be in keeping with Ramanujacharya. Must be. Read this paper that Rabindra Prabhu wrote. It's beautiful. It hits the nail on the head, and it goes even beyond that. The Temple of Vedic Planetarium and his vision or realizations about how that leads as a pathway to the spiritual world. It's pretty far out. So, sorry for those of you that don't like, ISKCON talk, but it seems to me this message fits in completely with a concern that your elders, not just me, and not just GBC members, but elders have to preserve ISKCON going into the future generations. And the message that I just shared is really important. It's really important. It's really important that we get it right. Yes?
Thank you, Maharaj.
Go ahead, just speak. Is which versus which? Managers versus leaders. Okay. How does that?
And those measures seem to me more designed to produce managers. And in the Vedic culture, we would have a group of brahmanas who were absorbed in the philosophy and the instructions, and they would set the vision, and the managers would carry it out, which to me makes sense of how one would take the teachings of Prabhupada and then carry them on to the future generation. So I was wondering if you could resolve the doubt for me somehow, because it seems to me that according to Vedic culture, the brahmanas would have to be aloof from day-to-day management to maintain that objectivity and neutrality. to apply spiritual instructions.
Would you be happy to hear that this has been considered? Part of the process, the classroom part, just like the concept at this point is, the classroom part is maybe 3 weeks to a month out of a year. And the rest is under mentors. And the mentors are the Brahmana group who know the content of, the subject matter and the direction, but they're just mentors. They're detached guides. Not like, the authority over the person who's going to do some administration, but a Brahmana type person who will oversee and guide that individual to help inculcate the model. What do you think of that?
Thinking still that, well, the first one, the doubt I have is that the fact that this person wouldn't be an authority, because in Vedic culture we see that the Brahmanas would have authority over the Kshatriyas. They would set the vision, and then the Kshatriyas would have to carry it out.
And in what way would they have the authority? They would have detached authority. They would have spiritual influence authority. Otherwise, they're managers using your model. You get it? No, you don't get it. The authority, here's the Chanakya Pandit model. Chanakya Pandit gave some advice to the king. The king didn't like his advice. No problem. He started packing up to leave. There's no point in my being here. He didn't have any managerial authority. It was detached authority. And the king said, no, I want you to remain. So it was spiritual influence authority, not. Otherwise, he's another manager in the chain of managers. He's the chief manager. He's the CEO over the king. That's not the Brahmana's role. And it's subtle, and it's intricate, and to recreate the model from Kali Yuga mush is going to take some time. And taking words, it's not possible. How many times did Prabhupada say it's not possible? And yet again, there's times when he said we must. So it's not going to be Vedic times today. It's going to be according to the best wisdom that can be mustered, going in increments towards the direction of the model. So there's some other people that have their hand up, and you've got a still question mark in your forehead. But back there, hey monkey.
I had a question to ask during the class when I was hearing, but I was hesitating. But once Himanshu asked his question, that kind of prompted me to ask
You got two
this.
questions now. Okay.
So, my understanding, I want clarification actually.
This is like an Istagosti now, by the way. It's not just a Bhagavatam class.
So my understanding is that to assume that the authority or the leader is just a Kshatriya or has a Kshatriya quality may be not a complete picture.
That's correct.
Because in the Kali Yuga, I don't want to embarrass you, but you do like a GBC service is more like a administrative kind of a service. But I know that you're also into a lot into education, you're very scholarly, you're respected a lot as scholar. And even Gauranga Prabhu, if I'm not wrong, many years ago, that I knew, he was also a temple president while he was training and educating younger devotees. So kind of sometimes qualified leaders play both roles as a Brahmana and as a Kshatriya. So to assume that a leader is just a Kshatriya and not a Brahmana may not be you have to look individually. Maybe sometimes some leaders are Kshatriyas and may not be so inclined towards education and Brahmanical approach to their
Yes.
leadership.
The whole topic, just, so you want to come to the punchline of your question?
No, this is
comment.
my understanding, is my understanding right? Or
Yeah,
would you like to?
one can take it further in 10 different layers of subtleties. There's different styles. Let's take Radhanath Maharaj. He's a GBC. Is he administrator? But he does what he does by spiritual influence. He does through others. But if we all did that, how would that work? What would it look like? Or, here's another example. Some of the devotees here are disciples of Radhanath Maharaj, and they know Gauranga, who gives these fantastic, brilliant seminars. He's brilliant. But wow, is he a manager? I mean, an organizer, let's say. He's a systems guy. Rather than, whenever he does, he creates a system for it so it's replicable. Is that Brahminical or is that managerial? He's Brahminical, but he has a brain that's like, he's brilliant. I mean, through associating with him, I've grown to appreciate him a whole lot in both areas, what he speaks and in his ability to organize things. Well, I can give examples, but of what he's done. He's just amazing. When Radhanath Maharaj has his yatras, he's in charge of the kitchen. He's got I don't know however many people, 100 people, organizing the whole thing. And then it's done and he goes in the afternoon session with Radhanath Maharaj. He's amazing. Or they have this I forget what it's called, some kind of certification where you get a certification for being up to standard. And he did that for the whole Chopati temple. He's a systems guy. And it was and anyway, there's layers of differences. So to brand, you only look at one way of looking at I'm supporting what you're saying. There's this, it's black and white. And there's only one black and white is not an accurate picture of either reality today or how to get to a better place tomorrow. Just like chop and put cabbage over here and carrots over there. That's oversimplistic. This is a big topic. It's not going to be resolved today in our Bhagvatam class. It's going to take years of very serious people contemplating in a very serious way. Here's one that may hit one of your sensitivity buttons, I don't know. But the whole issue of women gurus. I mean, for you it may not be, but for some people it is. And there are, there's the spectrum of voices is very broad. One of the persons who I respect very much, Shivaram Maharaj, wrote a little paper saying, in the case where Janava, Hemalata, and others, Gangamata Goswamini, became gurus, they were on this terribly, incredibly advanced position. And those that are not should follow the Varnashram system and be under the protection of. Whereas, and it's what a controversial limb to go out, whereas men don't have that restriction by Varnashram principle. And women go, hey, wait a minute, equality, it's not fair, one size fits all. But that's not the Varnashram system. And as he says, I'm not a liberated soul. I need that restriction. And because he's living in a community where they try to apply the principles of our ashram within their community. And there's a good place to look at to see, the complexity, where they're trying in real time, in real today, to work with transcendental Vaishnava principles, at the same time recognize the differences in how to organize society. Because that's Krishna's system. So how to organize society where there's diversity and complexity at the same time. It's a major challenge. And don't be surprised to hear that there isn't always agreement, even in New Vrajadam in Hungary. So there's a lot of work, and sincere people need to apply themselves thoughtfully, patiently, diligently over time, working in a cooperative dialogue method where we take steps that resonate and make sense, and we take that step and do it nicely, and the next step and do it nicely, and so on. So a step is this mentoring idea. It's like a minister that has a brahminical role. He doesn't have authority over the system. He has spiritual influence because of his jnana and vijnana. Part of the problem is persons that there are not so many brahminical people. That is to say, that not only have theoretical knowledge, but have practical application knowledge, and they're not involved in doing it. Theoretical knowledge is one thing. Anyway, it's going to take a lot of very thoughtful, very patient, very sincere, very dedicated, and willing to cooperate persons to work together to take the next step and take the next step. But it's not, so it's just back to your question, it's not a cookie cutter formula. There's this bucket and then there's that bucket, and we just have to put people in the right bucket. It's not like that. It's not going to work. It's not reality, it's not how to get to where we want to go. Even like Vasudev, he was a Kshatriya, but his strength was not like fighting. His strength was advising. He used that strength to calm Kamsa through his diplomacy. And his truthfulness, which is a brahminical quality, although he was in a Kshatriya position. Because he's so truthful, Kamsa said, okay. And he kept his word. Now kings keep their word too, but he was in an advisor, a minister role, but still within a Kshatriya family. So it's not a smoothie. Hot topic for an ashram. Prahlad.
I had a question, Maharaj.
Yeah?
But first of all, thank you for the class, Maharaj.
Okay.
If someone asks me, like, how Prabhupada, they say he's the founder Acharya, but then and then they say he's part of a disciplic succession, but then they're like, then how is it disciplic succession if he's the founder Acharya?
He's the founder Acharya of ISKCON. He's not the founder Acharya of Vaishnavism, but a branch of Vaishnavism, he's the founder Acharya of. As Bhaktisiddhanta was the founder Acharya of the Gaudiya Math. He didn't originate. So those who are followers of Bhaktisiddhanta accept him as the founder Acharya. Now within that, followers of Bhaktisiddhanta, anyway, you can read this nice paper by Rabindra and it explains it. Rasika Manjari?
Guru Maharaj, when we're part of such discussions, as a lay person in ISKCON, like this morning, there are so many questions in my mind. Like I have
There's so many questions in all of our minds.
Questions.
Collectively, we have a big wheelbarrow filled with questions.
Yeah, and like you said, it's going to take so many qualified people for like so many years with so much thought for this to go in some direction. And I'm here thinking, okay, so I've been part of this, and I have all these questions, and what was the point? Because it's not my service, and now I'm just sitting with all these questions. What do I do with it stimulates my brain intellectually, but where do I go? I mean, I don't understand what was the purpose for me. And what am I supposed to do with this when at the end of it I have just so many more questions that remain unresolved?
Can I ask a question about your question? You want to know, is your question, what do I do with these questions? Where do I go with these questions? That's not your question.
Yeah, yes, given that it's not my service to
That's
be one
okay.
of those persons.
But you're a family member. It's not your service, but you're a family member. And you're a thoughtful family member. And so, in your particular case, you're taking on a role, a initiative role, which is involving other people. So, other people who may be looking to you may come with their questions, and we would like you to be able to, and you would like to be able to respond, rather than just throwing your hands up the air, shrugging your shoulders, and saying, I have the same questions, but it's not my service, Prabhu, so, I go.
But I feel like I'm stuck there because I don't feel like I have an avenue to explore all those questions and where somebody can give me those answers. So I feel it's better for me and the persons who may ask me that I put my hands up in the air and say I have the same questions, and let's just move on, keep life simple, and focus on our service.
Well, that's one response. That's one response. Then there can be another response. You have the authority who you go to or are accountable to and have trust in, and you can go to that authority and say, I have a number of questions, and should I do that, or should there be a forum for at least, titrate it a little bit over time, like not all the questions, but take part of the thing is narrow it down to one or two questions, and you'll find there's a thread between that you can get a clear picture in one or two questions. It connects with a lot of some of the other questions indirectly. So sort out with their assistance. So another option: sort out one or two really important questions and try to get a clear answer to those one or two questions. Or, here's another option. This disciple course that I mentioned, that will be mandatory for future candidates for initiation, it explores a number of these things. Relationship things and principle things and applications of principle things, and so those that have taught it, Anuttama and Lakshmi Moni, are saying it really needs to be taught by a very experienced devotee, because these kinds of details, the popcorn machine starts to pop, because when you put the corn on the heat, it starts to pop. And questions come up, and persons need to have processed those questions and have at least thoughtful answers. If not, let me go back to some of the other Prabhus who teach this course, and I'll get back to you with the answer, or some thoughts on your question. So it's a forum for creating not an Istagostiya situation exactly, but exploring. Or, here's another option. I I was requested, and I'm trying to fulfill the request of having. This isn't like an ISKCON. It's one of the pieces of ISKCON is Guru Tattva slice of the pie of ISKCON, and in Labor Day weekend, I guess you won't be attending because you'll be doing your cooking over here, but we're going to be discussing that. So maybe, listen to it live or recordings and send your text messages over, and because we're going to have panel discussions, presentations and panel discussions. I was hoping to have a fourth person. Like this, I'm just giving some options of some ways, where's your go-to place? Because I think it is important. You can just a number of things, just put it in the back burner, not like off the stove, but back burner, simmering or something. And, put in the front burner things that are more essential and some medium for exploring them. And your questions may be very similar to others, and they may be different from others, and others may have questions different from yours, that their questions really, you've resolved, and they've got some other questions. And here's another one, maybe we can arrange something right here in Chicago where we take some of these topics. Here's an idea, just came from your question, an idea. We're going to have our North American GBC meeting here. We could schedule something the evening before and the morning classes of and the evening classes of, where it's selected topics, ask people to prepare on, things, take some questions beforehand, sift through those questions, select out some, and ask our speakers to speak on those topics and allow discussion time and record it, for other venues. What do you think of that? Okay.
Maybe because it gives from the first few, the Gita Nagari one seems good, but it's just that in a wider audience, you just can't address the things that need to be addressed, I feel. And then the last option, at least it gives enough variety of representation, I guess, within ISKCON.
Well, just thinking a little bit more on this, instead of just having a presenter, we could have a panel, and 2 or 3 different panels that, change around. You want something? Make question what? Against?
He wants to make a comment.
Sure, but she's got the microphone. I think you just kicked the ball into the middle of the court and it's moving around, so let's hear. I like the idea, well, you got the microphone, I like the idea of, hey, we'll take a little, not only here in this temple, but, let the leaders of other places take, poll in their temples and come up with some topics and, have some speakers speak on some topics and then open it up for discussion. And we can even have it live, that people can call in from other places and ask questions, and have 6 Istagostis or something while everybody's here. That'll be lively, very colorful, like 4th of July. Go ahead.
Just hearing the questions and being in the middle of all of it, I feel that at this point in time, as a unit here, we may not be ready to solve an ISKCON-wide problem or issue by problem, but something that's at home. And some Istagoshtis would be very helpful. I was wondering if I could request you that with your next visit, maybe we have an informal Istagoshti, no recording, nothing. And then the things that are below the surface, the questions that are coming up, that we can deal with the actual ones.
Sure. And what would be the right time to do that? Morning or evening?
One
You
whole
got people in the kitchen with their aprons on. You
on
know.
a weekend, we just block off a Saturday time.
So that broadens it, and then it's the community, and then there's the temple.
I would rather start with the temple here.
I would. So you have it on the weekend, and it's the community. So better weekday.
Weekday depends on who all can attend. Weekday means work. But if we know ahead of time, we could get off work early or something. Get late.
Weekday, I think is better.
Yes.
Something morning, something evening, like that.
Yes, correct.
Because you have it weekend, and it's going to be whoop-de-doo. You can't. You tell people they can't come, and then the relevance changes.
Yeah. Because there are this.
So you work on that.
Conception.
You work on that.
I will. Thank you.
And I'll work on the other one.
Yes.
At our next call on Wednesday, I'll put something out and say, what do you guys think? What do you propose think of doing this? I like it. Something the evening before, and then morning, evening, morning, evening, morning, evening, with lists of topics and panels of devotees. So it's not just one voice. If someone says, I think we should go left, someone can also say, well, I think we should go right. And another one can say, well, I think we need to stay in the middle. And that's, that diversity of view can help you understand it's not I see your hand, Krunudi. It's not that, it's only one voice. And that's it, because that person said it, that's it. There are multiple voices, as there's multiple voices within our community, within the temple and within the community. There's amongst the leadership. Not everybody says the same thing and sees the same thing and has this, but it would be educational for everyone to see how the diversity at the same time has its unity, and the diversity can be, by respecting diversity, can lead to harmony within that diversity, provided there's certain principles, like respect, that doesn't get violated. And so it'll be educational just in terms of the process itself, what to speak of what's spoken. I like it very much. Karuna Nidhi. There's two. Temple and when in August when the leaders come. Local, like just temple. It can go from the temple to, the broader, once the temple topic gets completely cleared. In this lifetime, maybe.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, I am very sorry it is out of time. And I have a very quick question, just from the verse number 13 you read. There it is stated that one of the cause is to subdue the anger is self-realization.
Yes.
And there it has been asked that you have to inquire within yourself for the self-realization to subdue that anger. But my question is, at the same time, can we inquire from authorities?
That's part of real self-realization. Self-realization doesn't mean I just inquire. I sit in a cave, or I sit in my room upstairs, or I go for a walk by the lake and I inquire. That's not the meaning. Okay? Gokulananda, and that's it?
Okay. Maharaj, I have...
You always ask these thought-provoking questions, so I'm ready. I got my seatbelt fastened.
Now, first question is how the topic or the issue of preserving ISKCON, Srila Prabhupada, specifically how Srila Prabhupada established and lead ISKCON, how do we fit that with the 7 purposes of ISKCON?
How do we fit that with?
The 7 purposes of ISKCON.
Well, it's integral.
In the sense that...
Like this. That's how they fit.
Yes.
But, there's this whole body of history of anecdotal experiences where Prabhupada said and did things, his books, his letters, his personal instructions, that's like fills out those 7. How does this, of the 7 principles, how does it play out in real time? Under Prabhupada, the founder Acharya's guidance. So, but it's the seed, and then there's the details, or the practical application of the seed.
Yeah, I understand the essence. It's not a question to challenge, but
I don't take it as a challenge.
Yeah, I want to know if in the 7 purposes of ISKCON, Prabhupada didn't put himself in it, in the center. He established ISKCON. He put purposes, specifically primarily, ISKCON is an institution meant to propagate spiritual knowledge to the whole society.
Okay.
And on the other side, on the other hand, Srila Prabhupada is the founder Acharya of that institution, and he establishes those purposes. So, of course,
yes.
There is a very strong relation.
Yes.
But when it comes to propagate this knowledge, everyone will agree in the teaching of Srila Prabhupada that is the base, but the way that knowledge will be distributed from now to 10,000 years on, society will change.
Yes. Yes, okay. I get your question. Let me just distill it down. It's, is continuing, it's a high, continuing to be relevant and relatable without compromising principle and mood. So it's not that we can't do anything other than what Prabhupada did, or you're in prison, we're in the penalty box, we're bad, we're wrong, we're deviants. The expansiveness and the relevance and relatability must be there, and at the same time, the parameters in principle given to us by our founder Acharya must be observed. I can give one example, just as a for example. During Prabhupada's time in New York, direct experience, there was a group of devotees that were really into theater. Nayana Bharam and Rasagyan, Lavitaksha and Nanda Kishore and Janava and different devotees. Lokamangala, they're really good, really good. So they made dramas, and their wish was to perform the dramas for Prabhupada's pleasure. And Prabhupada was very pleased. And then during the drama, if there was something that was humorous and the devotees in the audience laughed, right in the middle of the drama, he would say, "Don't laugh, this is serious." So there was a standard of what he wanted from the audience in view. It wasn't entertainment. It was bhav. It was feelings of devotion for the Supreme Lord. This is like, Krishna Leela and Ram Leela and things like that. Skits are different. So there's a principle of the performers to go forward with. So there may be other things. And then they took the ideas and thought, let's do drama for the public. They started doing skits on the street with Harinam, because Harinam was huge. And they would perform street skits. It was like really amazing. We would go to the theater district, and right in the middle, we'd stop the kirtan, and then normally someone would speak, but instead of someone speaking something for the crowd that was there, Lokamangala and Rasigya did a little skit, dressed like everybody else that was there dressed, and having, speaking very loudly. So everyone was captivated, and they passed the message on through skits. And then someone would come and speak, the wrong bank account, right in the middle of the street. It was like, great. And then they told Prabhupada about that. And this is how we're using theater to augment the Harinam. It was very nice. And then they started doing it publicly in public venues. And they would, share with Prabhupada with great appreciation, and Prabhupada wrote back, and how many books were distributed? Oh. Prabhupada wanted books to be distributed along with the drama, not just stand alone. So there's a principle. And if one is thoughtful, one can take what Prabhupada did and be creative and innovative like anything, but there's principles that are to be observed. That's just a for example. We're a quarter after. So one more question. You have a follow-up of that?
Yes.
Okay, keep going.
Thanks. Well, regarding those principles, you gave me an example of Srila Prabhupada, but different, even among the Prabhupada disciples, they have different understanding of what is Srila Prabhupada's principles and applications.
Of course. So therefore we need to communicate and collaborate and reach some consensus.
Yes. And you mentioned that if someone wants to do something different and not loyal to Prabhupada, they can do it, but not within ISKCON. But what determines what is loyal to Prabhupada or not, that's my concern, because I see, for example, the Catholic history of the Church, and they condemn many of their great them, and then after 100 years, they include them again. At that time they were thinking they were right and they were preserving the institution, but 100 years later they realized, not those people, the new generation realized that they were wrong, and they include, and they have a pattern in the history. So I'm concerned how ISKCON now, this generation of Prabhupada disciples, or what they are determined now that is within ISKCON or not within ISKCON, after 100 years, it may be different. So how we, as the next generation, we can really understand what is within ISKCON or not within ISKCON, when we have
where we draw the line.
Sensitive things, like Prabhupada disciples trying to establish something within ISKCON, can be effective, but they don't have the support from other Prabhupada disciples. But maybe they are right, but some section of Prabhupada disciples determine that group of devotees are not right, but then after 100 years we realize, oh, they did a mistake.
I got the message.
Yeah.
Excellent point. And to amplify, Prabhupada said, I don't have the exact quote, but it's repeated all the time, so I'm sure it was said, we should study the structure of the Catholic Church to help understand how ISKCON continues, because the Catholic Church has continued for so long. It certainly had its problems, to say the least, corruption and mistakes, but this is not just structure. Now, you're speaking of, inclusive, exclusive. Let us not repeat the same type of mistake of being exclusive when we should be inclusive, and how to not make those same mistakes. So persons who are in the position of leadership, Himanshu is not here right now, but persons who are in a position of leadership can be both spiritual and other, organizational, because a spiritual person is also a leader of types. He leads those who follow him. And there's those that are involved themselves within the organizational structure. And they're also leaders. They may also be inspirational as well as organizational. They have, multiple capacities or multiple roles or services given to them by Krishna. So within that mix, there needs to be two things, minimally. Open dialogue. Hear from one another. We have to be able to hear from one another openly. Be critical, self-critical, and hear the concerns of others openly. Like a king has to have ministers and hear from others. The other that must be there is decision-making must be done. There must be a decision-making principle or authority for making decisions. Must be. A very deficient authority is one who doesn't listen. A very deficient authority is one who listens and doesn't decide. Decision-making must be made. And the authority for that must be descending. That's our system. That's like it or not. I'm not speaking to you. One may like it, one may not like it. That is the system that Prabhupada gave us. There is a structure where descending authority was invested by Prabhupada in different entities, because he invested authority in presidents. He invested authority in the GBC, like it or not. And the persons that are presidents and the persons that are GBC may not have the vastness of qualification where they don't make the mistakes like the mistake that you just indicated, and so many others that are potential mistakes. We'll say it the other way around. Less than perfect persons are going to make mistakes. There has to be a position of authority. And I'll tell you an anecdotal, this isn't the end of the discussion, but an anecdotal experience directly with Srila Prabhupada, where Prabhupada had taught us to follow the authority, and he complimented us for following the authority even when the authority was off. You want to hear it? ISKCON in New York started at 26 Second Avenue. Eventually, because it's a small storefront, it was outgrown, and they moved to across the street and up to 64 Second Avenue. No, whatever it was, 65, something like that. Across the street and up on the second floor. I forget the number. And they outgrew that. So then one leader decided, let's move to a place where we can have space. So a double brownstone building was was rented in Henry Street, Brooklyn. So 26 to 65 Second Avenue to Brooklyn. 439 Henry Street, Brooklyn. And what was the example? Krishna, Krishna. I forgot the example I was going to give you. Huh? What? Yes. Okay, yes. So there was a leader, Bhavananda. Bhavananda was sent to Mayapur to work with Jaipataka Maharaj and develop Mayapur. And Bali Mardan came in as the the temple president and GBC, he installed somebody as the temple president. Gopichandra Ballava became the temple president. And Balimardan then, at that time, was a sannyasi. So he was put in charge of both the temple, as a GBC, and ISKCON Press, because there wasn't a separate entity. And over time, Balimardan did lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of very wonderful service. He made some mistakes, he made some offenses, but he did lots and lots of service. Lots and lots of service. And then he became spiritually weak, generally, and I think in his case particularly, pride because he was so successful. Pride goeth before the fall. You've heard that phrase. And so he became enamored with a Japanese woman who he told us she's the heiress of the Toyota fortune. You know, what did we know? And so he was courting her, and he eventually married her. From a sannyas to marrying this Japanese woman. And in course of time, he broke all the 4 regular principles in that position of leadership, without all the details. Horrible, 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 horrible. The members of the temple continued to follow him. Eventually, the temple president, who knew things that I didn't know, because I was just a Sankirtan leader sending everybody out on Sankirtan, and it was fun. I didn't know anything about anything, what was going on. I was just, absorbed in Sankirtan. Honestly, I didn't know anything. But the president knew, and the president eventually just literally packed his bag and her bag and set them on the front porch and said, "Don't come back again. You're out of here." Shortly after, Prabhupada wrote a letter, which was placed on the entrance just before the temple room, because it was, it was that kind of a place. It was the most public place you could find. And it was a letter from Prabhupada, which I read every day before going into the temple room, so I remember. Prabhupada thanked us for following a teaching us, which was that we follow our leader. And then he went on to say, "You are not responsible for any of the wrongs that have been done because you are following my instruction to follow your leader. So now he's gone, and please be peaceful. You have new leadership, and just carry on with your devotional service. Thank you all very much." But I didn't find out till much later that when Prabhupada wrote that letter, he was in Hawaii, and Jayadvaita Swami also happened to be in Hawaii, and Prabhupada blasted him up and down and sideways. Said, "You knew about these things and you didn't do anything?" Because there's somebody who was in a position to do something, although he wasn't a manager, he was a senior devotee. And he should have done something. He didn't do something, so he chastised severely. And others that knew and didn't do anything. They were in a position to do something. But the rank and file were simply following. I mean, we're very innocent. Maybe foolish, but very innocent. So there are situations, and then ultimately there's Krishna, and Krishna corrected the thing. And then, the person who was the president did the right thing. He just, removed him. Although it's not the position of subordinate to remove the superior, he just removed him because it was so egregious. No questions. So there's something to following those that are in the decision-making position. And if there's somebody that's in the decision-making position that doesn't get it right, there are mechanisms within the system for correcting that person. Now, those mechanisms aren't well developed right now. in ISKCON. This is my comment. So what the attempt is, as far as the bigger picture of ISKCON, is it's way overdue, but performance evaluation, standards and criterion and mechanisms for performance evaluation of our top leaders, GBC members. And with that, the culture percolating down to the performance evaluation of temple presidents, and we're going to have another title, zonal supervisors, without all the detail. So performance evaluation. And if there's somebody's lacking in some capacity or another, it'll not just go on undetected forever. And if it goes on, if it's detected, there's an opportunity to improve, an opportunity to improve, an opportunity to improve. And if the improvement doesn't come, then relocating that person to some service that's suitable for them. It's going to take time to get that together, but that's the direction. Now that's organizational. Now within that, just the last part, and I'm going to end because it's, my goodness, it's 9:30. The role of those who aren't administrators and the recognition of the importance of those persons, as Jayadvaita Swami was in. Similarly, senior devotees who aren't administrators, and particularly sannyasis who aren't administrators, they have a very important role to play in preserving the integrity and standards and, expansion in the diversity matter, or the innovative, relevant, and all matters to do with society. They have a very important role to play. Prabhupada spoke about that, he wrote about that. So what's their role, the detached sannyasis and other senior devotees' role in our society going forward in time? Now it's informal. Should it be identified? Last year, we held a sannyasi guru and GBC gathering prior to our GBC meeting, and we're going to do another one. It was well attended, and it was very productive. And so, it's what's their place, the detached senior personalities in our society. It's not like all-inclusive, but it's it's a beginning point. And what's their role in preserving the unity, the integrity, and facilitating the diversity? Doing that stirs the topic so that those that are in a leadership position can share with others, as Rasika Manjari was indicating, where it's not just one voice, like a strong, I'm the zonal authority voice. It's plurality of voices sharing and coming with a directional consensus of how to go the next step, so we can maintain relevancy and relatability and connect well with others. Leaders need to be able to do that. That's the dialogue part. And then there's the decision-making part. There has to be a decision-making, the buck stops here, role. Prabhupada was very clear what he wanted. However imperfect, as with the Catholic Church, they made their mistakes. The GBC, one can cite them, has made mistakes and has gone back and corrected some mistakes, and there may be some further mistakes that need to be further corrected. But so the GBC needs to be open to hear. I can think of one or two decisions that were made that have some lasting impact that need to be revisited. Or just waiting for some, like this female Diksha Guru topic, to get sorted out till we get to some of those other ones. Because that's a lot of energy going into that one. A lot of people with a lot of different opinions on that one. Just for your information, on that one alone, every time it comes up, it's come up for the past female Diksha Gurus. There have been practically an even split vote to the number when our GBC votes on this. Some on this side, some on that side. Yes, no, and abstain. And not too many abstentions, it's either yes or no. So it needs to be, we need to continue to have dialogue. Because we can't just, say yes or just say no. And then everybody, because the rest of the people are off in the ditch. Or feel that they haven't been heard, or something. To get it right isn't easy. I know what my view is, but it's not the same as some others. Like you pointed out. It's not easy. I'll trade places with you. Haribol. See you the Prabhupada ki? Jai.